Hola chicos y chicas y bienvenidos a este video que se trata del imperfecto del subjuntivo. So, in this video today, what we're going to be talking about is the imperfect subjunctive or the past subjunctive. Now, before we go on, it's important to remember that the subjunctive, which is a concept that we spent a lot of time on, is a verb conjugation, grammatically speaking, but what makes it different from the other verb conjugations that we've done in the past is that it doesn't belong to a certain time. If anything, it kind of exists outside of time. So what we want to do whenever we talk about el subjuntivo is think about kind of when we're talking about. So again, subjunctive is not a tense. It's what we would call a mood. So what we have to do is kind of specify what type of subjunctive we're talking about at a given moment. So what we're talking about now is the imperfecto. So we're taking what we've already learned, which was the present subjunctive, el presente del subjuntivo, okay? And we're just putting it in the past, right? So it's not too complicated. We've already done most of the work in terms of understanding the subjunctive. And so what we're going to be doing is basically, again, taking the present subjunctive and putting it in the past. So, before we move on, it's going to be important to review the present subjunctive. So again, el presente del subjuntivo, okay, presente del subjuntivo. Again, remembering that the subjunctive is a mood, right, not a tense, was something that we went over in quite some detail. So, how did we get the present subjunctive? Let's, before we move into the past subjunctive again, make sure we get the present down. This is what we did. In order to conjugate, first of all, we took the yo form of the present tense, right, and we added opposite endings. So, what would that look like, right? So, if we took hablar, por ejemplo, right, the yo form of hablar in the present tense is hablo, right? So, we took off the o. It's an AR verb, so we had these new endings. It was hable, hables, hable, hablemos, habléis, hablen, right? If we had a verb like venir, right, which was a yo-go verb in the present tense, it's venga, vengas, not gengas, gengas can, no, vengas, right? So venga, vengas, venga, vengamos, vengáis, vengan. So the conjugation was something, again, that we went over quite a bit. And what we did was we took the yo form and we added those opposite endings, okay? Now, the use of the present subjunctive was a little bit more complicated, but again, it followed a certain formula, right? We had two subjects, okay? So you need two subjects in nearly all cases of the subjunctive in the present tense, right? So if I said, for example, I hope to play basketball next year, there's only one subject in that sentence. It's I, right? So it would be yo espero jugar, right? There's no change in subject. Most often there's no subjunctive. Also, you need que and you need weirdo. So weirdo, again, this is just something to help us remember when to use the subjunctive. It's when we have will and influence, right? When we want something to happen. Yo quiero que hagas tu tarea. I want that you do the homework. Emoción, right? We've talked about emoción. Es triste que nosotros no, yo no sé, hablemos más español en clase. I, right, referred to impersonal expressions. R is, requests, okay? Then we had doubt, denial, and ojalá, right? So this was the basic breakdown of the present subjunctive. And look, here are some examples, stuff that we've done before. Espero que hayas estudiado para el examen. That's perfect being put in there. Hayas estudiado, present subjunctive. Es malo que no tengamos más vacaciones. So mira, do we have two subjects? Yes, in this case we do. Yo espero que tú hayas estudiado. Yo and then tú. Es malo is the first. It's impersonal, but it's emotion, but we can think of it as a subject. Es malo que no tengamos. So it goes from es malo to nosotros, right? And then, of course, we have que. So these are things that we've done in the past. If you remember, we talked about making statements using emotion, things like es triste que, right? So in order to move on, we really need to understand that the subjunctive, again, is this stuff that is up in the air, right? It's not a tense, it's not a time, it's more of a feeling, it's more of a mood, right? So it's important to keep in mind the concept of the subjunctive in the present before we move into the past, okay? Now, looking to the past tense, or the past of the subjunctive. The conjugación, okay, es un poco complicada, right? It's only complicated because it takes into account former conjugations. So how do we conjugate the past subjunctive, el imperfecto del subjuntivo? What we need to do is go to our old friend el pretérito, okay? What we do is this. We take ellos, ellas, ustedes form of the preterite, okay? So if we use our classic verb hablar, it's hablaron, right? Would be the ellos, ellas, ustedes form. If we had vivir, it would be vivieron. If we had hacer, it would be hicieron. If we had decir, dijeron, right? What we do is we take off the ron, okay? So the ron part of that, okay? And we add these new endings. We have ra, right? So with hablar, it would go to hablara in the yo form, right? The tu form would be hablaras, right? Then the el, ella, usted form, hablara, right? And this is important. It's not the future tense, which is hablará. It's hablará, okay? Then habláramos with an accent. Then hablarais, and then hablaran, okay? Now, a ver lo que dice, ¿no? No accent, hablarais, ¿vale? Hablaréis. So, it's important to remember, okay? It's important to remember that we're taking off the ron, right? We're adding these new endings, okay? So, ra, ras, ra, ramos, rais, ran, okay? Es súper importante tener en cuenta esta idea. So, now that we have the imperfect subjunctive conjugations down, let's get into how we use it. Now, it's going to be pretty familiar to us because we already understand the concept of the subjunctive. Again, all we're doing is putting it into the past tense. So what does that look like? Let's take a look. Now, before we go on, more examples of the conjugation, right? So, escribir goes to escribieron in the el y usted form of the preterite, right? So what we need to do is take off the ron, okay? Take off the ron, and what we're going to do is add these new endings. So it's escribiera, escribieras, escribiera, escribiéramos, escribierais. There is an accent here, escribierais, and escribieran, right? Keep in mind that there are these irregulars. Estar goes to estuv, right? Estuvieron, so it goes to estuviera in the yo form. Traer in the yo form would go to trajera. Ir, fuera, that's important. Tener, tuviera, saber, supiera. Okay? So es súper importante recordar que los irregulares son, bueno, se quedan iguales, right? They stay the same in that we conjugate it to the ellos, ellas, ustedes form, okay? Take off the ron and add these new endings, okay? Now, how do we use this? It's simple. We're basically taking the present tense of the subjunctive and putting it in the past. So that means that we're going to be implementing imperfect and preterite in the place of the present, okay? So let's keep that in mind when we're looking at these examples. So if I say, for example, yo quiero que tú hagas la tarea, got cut off there a little bit, okay? If I'm saying that, yo quiero que tú hagas la tarea, I want you to do the homework, okay? Or I want that you do the homework. What you're basically going to do in the pasado, right? What you're basically going to do is put this in the past, right? So instead of saying, I want that you do the homework, I'm going to say, I wanted. So you could say yo quise, right? You could also say yo quería, right? Because it's querer is a typically kind of imperfect what was going on emotion. Or you could use, let's just say, using the preterite, yo quise, I wanted that you do the homework, okay? So it would change. So we're going from the present, yo quiero, right, to the preterite, the past, yo quise, and then we're going from the present subjunctive, hagas. We know that the él y usted form of hacer is hicieron. We take off the on, so it's the tu form, hicieras la tarea, right? So instead of saying again, yo quiero que tú hagas la tarea, I'm putting it in the past. Yo quise, using the preterite, que tú hicieras la tarea, right? Here are some examples. Me pidieron, right? So instead of saying, I ask you not to arrive late, which would look like this, or they ask me, me piden, right? Present, que no llegue, right? That I don't arrive late. We're taking these verbs and we're making them past, right? So me pidieron, they asked me that I not, right? And then we know llegaron is the preterite, ellos, ellas, ustedes, so we take off the ron and we get llegará. So me pidieron que yo, you can add the yo if you want, no llegará tarde, okay? Let's look at these other examples. It surprised me. Again, in the present, you would say me sorprende que, right? Ustedes no vengan, right? Me sorprende que ustedes no vengan. But what we're doing is we're taking the present and we're making it past. So instead of saying me sorprende, it's me sorprendió in the preterite. Okay, ustedes, okay, no, and then vinieran, because it's vinieron in the ellos, ellas, ustedes form. Take off the ron and we get ran, right? Que ustedes no vieron. And then we have other examples. Salió antes de que yo pudiera. Remember, poder goes to pudieron in el pasado, en el ellos, ellas, ustedes form. They wanted me to write a romantic novel. Ellos querían que yo escribiera una novela romántica. Again, the toughest part of this will most likely be the conjugation, right? Remembering those ellos, ellas, ustedes forms of the preterite. But the use is really, it's not terribly complicated, because all we're doing is taking something that we already know, right? The subjunctive and el presente, right? The two subjects, que, weirdo. I mean, look, we still have those things. We still have two subjects in almost every case. We have que, we have weirdo, but we're just putting it in the past, okay? So remember, the present subjunctive was what we've already done, where we took the yo form and we did those opposite endings, right? Like hablar goes to hable in the yo form. Venir, venga. Ir goes to vaya. We had those irregulars. But when we go to the imperfecto del subjuntivo, the past subjunctive, the process is a little bit different. We go to the preterite form, right? Again, going back in our conjugations. We take the ellos, ellas, ustedes form. We take off the ron, okay? We add these nuevas terminaciones, ra, ras, ra, ramos, rais, ran, and we get this, right? Hablar, we know goes to hablaron in the ellos, ellas, ustedes form of the preterite. We take off the ron and we get yo hablará, right? We have other examples. Estar, estuviera, because these were irregular in the preterite, but they follow this pattern. Okay, escribir goes to escribiera, etc. Okay, and then finally, we talked about the use. Okay, we're essentially taking the present subjunctive, el presente, and putting it into the past. So instead of saying they want me to write, we want to say they wanted that I write. Okay, so ellos querían que yo escribiera. Instead of ellos quieren que yo escriba, ellos querían, perdón, que yo escribiera. Okay, so the past subjunctive is really kind of the next level. Okay, el imperfecto del subjuntivo. We're moving on, and we're taking the subjunctive and kind of switching it to the past. Okay, so what I want to achieve with this video is basically an introduction. Okay, we're going to go more into detail. If you have any questions, please bring them to class. Vale, so esto es el imperfecto del subjuntivo. Hablamos en clase y si tienes una pregunta, por favor, escríbela y la podemos comentar. Vale, un placer siempre y nos vemos la próxima vez. Adiós.